Hello! Most of you who are watching this probably know me already. My name is Sarah and I'm a potter. I'm going to give you a very brief tour of my studio, which will not be a challenge for me because as you'll see it's quite small. I'm also going to then do a demo on throwing a plate. So first things first is the tour. It's raining outside, so let's hopefully not get too many drops on the camera. It's a little garden shed, as you can see. Kind of a not particularly big space. That's perfectly fine with me since I'm not a particularly big person. So on the inside here you can see this is my wedging. I clearly don't know how to angle the camera correctly. This is my wedging table. There's plaster in here, which is good for drying. There's a shelf down here that pulls in and out for my finished wares. You'll see some of these are still wet enough that they're on the bats. They were thrown today. Others have been thrown in the past and are covered in plastic, so they don't dry out too much. Here is, of course, the most important person or thing in the entire studio, and that is Scarf, the studio kitty. Say hello! Meow, meow, meow! Very important. There's some pieces up there that are bisque. There's a finished piece up there. I don't know why I haven't moved it, but I just haven't. Oh, look, sometimes he likes to step on my wares, so we might have some kitty paw prints on the plates. If he does it well, it's a nice design feature. We can call it a collaboration. Over here, you'll see we just kind of have a lot of random stuff. Propane tank, foam bats, a mixer that I like to use for small batches of glazes, chemicals, angle grinder, Dremel tool, light, very important, radio, ever present. Safety features, we have a respirator for particles and a respirator which should be in plastic. I'm very aware. I will get on that, but that's for chemical fumes. Safety first. Okay. Over here we've got some, I do not know how to angle this, you know, just kind of some textiles, some kiln shelves, some, you know, kind of random stuff like that. Bats. These are the ones I use for porcelain, so I like to keep them kind of separate and clean. Normally I keep my wear boards over here, that's where I'm putting the cameras, way to move, more bats and things like that. And that is it for the studio. It is cozy. Since I live in the Bay Area, that'll cost you about, I don't know, $1,600 a month if you were to rent it. So now I'm gonna get this settled, sorry about the fingers, settled here so that you can see kind of the wheel. Oh look, see that plate there? I had mostly finished filming a tutorial when the UPS guy came by and interrupted me. So that is the downside of working from home. So we're just going to move this baby aside. It's not quite done, but that's okay. Now we're going to get another bat. I happen to like these cheap Masonite bats. They're cheap. And I find they don't warp too badly. And if they do, they're so cheap that it's not a big deal to replace them. I'm using about 2 pounds of clay here. I already went ahead and wedged it. I didn't do any tutorial on that because it's kind of boring to watch. It's not the fun part. T2 is a nice, it's from Clay Planet in Santa Clara. It's a nice iron heavy grogged clay, so when I fire this up into the content reduction, which is the plan, should get some really warm toasty colors with lots of iron spotting and things like that. I like a more rustic look on this dinner set as opposed to more of a clean kind of finish, so that iron heavy and content reduction is just going to be gorgeous if that's the look that you like. So now we're just going to take this and right down there. Okay, we're going to spin the wheel nice and slow. No water on the hands quite yet because I'm just going to pat like this. The only reason no water on the hands is just it would splash. I don't mind getting dirty as a potter, of course, but I don't particularly like getting splashed in my face. It's just kind of unpleasant. So this part is just to kind of get it more in there. You can see when I threw it down, it was really off. And this just helps it to get a little bit more in the center. So it doesn't need to be perfect. We're going to do that in a second. And I'm just going to take my finger and just kind of seal around the bottom edge there. I don't want any water creeping under there, causing slickness between the clay and the bat, which can leave the clay lump to kind of shuffle off. And that can be very annoying and frustrating. And Scarf the cat would not appreciate having a big lump of clay laying on it, would you? Nope. Now we're going to spin lots of water because I'm going to have my hands all over the clay. So friction is the enemy when we are doing pottery for the most part. So more surface area equals more friction. So to counteract that, we use the lubrication, which for us is water. I'm also going to spin the wheel nice and fast. A lot of people, when they first start learning, don't want to spin fast. They feel out of control. The work is going to be a lot easier if you spin faster, though. So left arm, left elbow needs to be 100% stable. I like to lock that into my body. Some people will lock that into their legs. My legs are kind of short, so it doesn't work for me. But whatever is comfortable for you is fine. For me, it's into kind of my hip bone. I'm going to take this top hand and just push down. I want to do that part first so that I'm really making sure the clay and my bat are securely fastened to each other. Push down. Now I'm going to take my left hand, which is here on the side. It needs to be firmly connected both to the bat and to the clay. These fingers are not doing any work. We're talking about this part of the hand, not the fingers. Okay? If you're getting grooves and lumps in the clay, your fingers are doing too much. Okay? They can rest lightly, or you can keep them off, but do not dig them into the clay. Okay, so now the left hand is kind of going to push forward, and as we do that, we're going to see this clay come up tall and narrow. The top hand is still there, okay? It's pushing down just enough to help stabilize and make sure that the top isn't jumping around. But if I push with equal pressure, the top and the side hands, the clay won't move at all. So when I want the clay to come up, I have more pressure with my side hand. When I want the clay to come down, I have more pressure with my top hand. That doesn't mean that the other hand isn't doing work. It just means I need to be aware of which way the clay is moving, and is it moving the way that I want to? And if not, I need to increase pressure on one hand or the other. I can tell it's centered when it's not, bubbling, pushing against my hand back and forth. You can always double check by just laying your finger on it, and it feels like it's running nicely and smoothly against my hands. So we're making a plate. We're making a smaller dinner, smaller salad or dessert size plate. So the finished product is going to be about 7 inches wide. 2 pounds of clay, I'm finding, is maybe a little much for me, but you always want, if you're not sure, just always use a little bit more clay. It's easy enough to cut off, as you will see. If it's not enough clay, it's quite difficult to add it, right? So, and any clay that I cut off of this can just go back in the bag and get reused, so I'm not wasting. So since I'm doing a flat surface, I'm not opening down and out, right? I'm just going to be pushing. I'm not though, Scarpy. I know. Scarpy has opinions. I'm just going to be pushing this clay down. So I'm just going to, in the centering position, because stability is always the key. Hey, baby boy. What's up? He's just checking on me. I'm just going to push flat, flat, flat. Now, at a certain point, my hand is not going to be able to make contact from the middle all the way to the edge. For me, that's pretty early because I have quite small hands. For different people with adult-sized hands, it's going to be a little later. But whenever that point comes for you, then what I like to do is take my left hand, take that pinky and kind of push down in the middle, and then just kind of bring it out. Less pressure, actually, as I come out, right? When I'm in the middle, more pressure because I'm pushing this much clay. As I come out, I'm pushing less clay, so I don't need to push as hard if I am pushing less clay, right? It sounds obvious, but let me tell you, I didn't ever figure it out. In fact, someone told me. I'm just going to do a little bit of compression, just try and make sure that my surface is pretty flat here. And also with plates, it's good to, well, with anything, but in particular with plates, it's good to do a lot of compression. That's just pushing down on the clay. I just want these particles within the clay to snuggle nice and tight against each other. That's going to make the finished product a lot stronger. If I don't compress enough, if you're seeing a lot of what are called S-cracks, which are kind of these wavy cracks in the bottom of pots, you're not compressing enough, or you're leaving water sitting in the bottom. In some way, the bottom of the plate is getting weakened, and those are kind of the two biggest things. Not enough compression, and or letting water sit in the bottom. Okay? So now we're going to take the shrink ruler. This clay tends to shrink about 12%. Margin of error on clay shrinkage tends to be plus or minus 2%, so there's no guarantees on any of that, but 12% is a pretty good. I have a shrink ruler here. So we can see that each one of these inches is 12% larger than an actual inch. If I took a real ruler and measured it, you would see that that actual inch is smaller than what's on here. But that's good, that's what I want. So we're just gonna see, we want this to be, we're at about 6 3/4 or so, which is fine. I'm gonna make a lip on this and we're gonna push it out, so we're gonna get that extra width to 7 inches that way. Okay, everything on here looks nice and flat. I don't see any wells, no dip in the center, no well on the side. Everything feels nice and flat. Your plate bottom is actually going to be thick. When you throw, you're gonna feel like it's kind of thick, and consequently that means it takes more clay than one might think to make a plate. For a 7-inch plate, I'm using 2 pounds. For a full-size 10-inch dinner plate, I tend to use 4 to 4.5. It varies a little bit on which clay body I'm using, and that tends to be more than most people would think off the bat. And again, if you're going to make an error in judgment on how much clay you should use, err on the side of using too much. It's easy enough to remove clay. Adding clay, on the other hand, is a real pain. So now we're going to just stand up the edge because we want a little bit of a wall here. So I'm just going to take my fingers of my right hand, just kind of push that clay in and up. The left fingers here, they're not pushing down on the surface, right? Because otherwise I would get a well here. I don't want that. They're just resting there, providing some support, and you can see the 2 hands are always connected, so they're providing stability to my right hand. Okay, but as we come up, the other thing is you may want to use a sponge to do this. Doing this a lot can result in you grinding off your fingernails. I tend to have claws on the ends of my fingers, and so my fingernails are extra strong. But if you aren't in that boat with me, then you may want to use the sponge to help protect your fingernails, because you can grind them right off. And if I'm making plate sets, it does happen to me. Okay, so now that we stood up that wall a little bit, now we're actually going to come in and do a pull. So we want to pull that wall up. We don't want a lot of height here, but it was quite thick and we didn't want to leave it that thick. On the inside here, I did end up pressing down a little bit, so now I'm just using my thumb to kind of smooth and flatten that plate out. Okay. That left thumb was the one touching the clay, the right hand, which you can see doing some work in there. It's just providing stability. When throwing, hand position, body position, all of that is going to be a little different for everybody. There are certainly many different positions you can use with your hands and fingers when you're throwing. I will use different hand positions depending on what stage I am, what play I'm doing, anything like that. The most important thing, though, is always going to be stability. And if you can connect your 2 hands, your chances of stability are going to increase greatly. Okay, so now we're going to come up. We can see this is taller than I am going to want my finished plate to be. And just to see where we are at as far as width, we're not quite at 7 inches. That's fine. I can stretch the shape out a little bit. I just need to know where we are. Okay. What I'm doing here is just with a crook of my finger, I'm just rounding out that rim and ever so slightly compressing it. Don't push too hard or you'll push down. So now I'm using my nice curvy thumb. I have this nice, what's sometimes referred to as a hitchhiker's thumb. Very good for pottery. It's a built-in rib, essentially. I should always have this tool on me, whereas other ribs, which I will use for a variety of different tasks, you know, I forget them, I throw in different spots, so sometimes I will forget to bring tools with me. Sometimes you loan these out and then they never come back to you, which is a tragedy, but it happens. So this, I'm lucky enough to have a built-in rib on my thumb. So you're going to see me pull this portion very thin, but first I think we're going to trim it off because we still end up a little taller than I want. So the way that I'm going to do that is I just need to get the pan out of the way because I'm going to use my needle tool, and I just need that space there. And I'm not using a lot of water anymore, so I don't need to worry about splashing too much. I'm just going to take this, I'm going to use my leg and my pan to give this hand stability. I'm holding the tool closer to the working surface as opposed to down here, right? This is much less stable. This is much more stable. And then as the wheel turns, you know, relatively slowly, I'm just going to gradually, ever so gradually, push
that needle tool through and through and through. It's going to take several rotations. And then I want to make sure that I cut completely through. And then ideally that ring will just lift right off. Don't rush. Don't poke the needle through and then start the wheel. Don't rush poking the needle through. It needs some time. Okay? Now I'm just going to ever so slightly get some water on the rim there. You can see just on my fingertip I had some water. Then I'm going to use the crook here of my fingers. If using the crook of the fingers just isn't comfortable for you, a lot of people don't like it. I just like to have built-in tools, so I prefer to do it that way. Little piece of plastic, like from one of these, just rip off a little corner of plastic, get it wet, use that. Use a chamois, just a little bit of chamois like you would use to wash your car. Same idea. So now you're going to see me pull this rim here very thin. So we're going to get more height and we're going to get a lot more thin. This is a design that I am doing on this plate. I'm kind of playing around with. You do not need to do this if you do not like this design feature. It's something that I tend to like when I make jugs. I like to do this on the rims of jugs, bottles, things like that. It's just a design feature that speaks to me for whatever reason. And what I'm doing is I'm going to pull this very thin right here. Now you can see me adding just enough water here. And then I'm going to fold it over. So now I'm going to take, very stable here, right? Hands connected, arms connected to the body. And just fold. You'll see that I'm going to take my right thumb and use that right thumb to push that fold down. Once it's to the proper point, I will remove my right fingers from underneath that fold. And then just push in and join, 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 join. Just gives this rim a little bit of extra oomph. And I just, for whatever reason, find that very appealing. So the last step that I'm going to do here, compress the bottom, make sure everything's nice and even using my thumb, and then just kind of push out this shape until I get that nice, we call this a coupe style plate. Measure to make sure we're at about 7, which we are. Just make sure that rim is nice and clean. Make sure that bottom is nice and flat. I also like to have throwing marks left in my plate. These are going to be the spiral that we see. So I've flattened everything out. There's not really throwing marks in there. There's minimal, but they would get obscured by glaze. So now I'm just going to take my finger, start in the middle, very stable. You can see I'm stabilizing my hands together. And just gradually push and move that out just along the floor. You can't really do it on the wall because it'll be pushing and changing the wall shape. So we can see, right, there's a little bit of roughness there on the now. If I try and fix that now, I'm just going to smear and obscure the spiral in there. I find it's better to wait until I trim, or even when it's bone dry, and then I can just kind of buff any of these little goobers here off. Okay, there is a time and a place for fixing everything, and it's not always the appropriate time to do it when you're throwing or when you're done throwing. The clay is still really wet and squishy. Now I'm just going to wire it off, so with plates, because they're a little broader, wider along the bottom, I just take the pan off. I just find that it gets in the way. And I will take this guy out as well. This is my nice Brent wheel. The pans are on there nice and strongly, which I like. Just take my wire tool, lean it down over the edge of the bat because I don't want it to pop up and cut through the bottom of my plate. And just in one smooth motion, just pull that through. Okay, and now that is done. Well, let's see, we'll pick this up a little bit. I hope you all enjoyed that demo. Please feel free to ask me any questions, make any comments on it that you want, and have a great day. Thank you.